everybody, and welcome back to Joygasm, a video game and movie podcast. I'm Russ, and it's a tough job market out there. In episode 331 today, March 6th, 2024. I'm going to be going right into our topic of the day, which is game industry layoffs. This has been a big issue within the games industry for a while now. I know that just within the past year and a half-ish, it's gotten really, really bad. When it comes to 2023, we had approximately about 10,000 layoffs in the video game industry, and folks were hoping that it would be finished, it would be dealt with, and we can all move forward. Oh, go verklempt on that one. Unfortunately, that is not the case at all, because in 2024, we have continued said layoffs, and it is such a bummer to be able to have to weather ourselves through this. And in fact, when it comes to January and February, we have already almost hit the same number of folks who have been laid off from 2023 within the first 2 months of 2024. And I think at the time of this recording, the number's hovering right around 85 to 8,700 folks from just 2024 who have been impacted by layoffs, including myself, unfortunately. So, I mean, it's been heartbreaking to be able to sift through my LinkedIn feed and see just the sheer number of talented people. It really doesn't matter what kind of position they have held, really. I mean, everybody, well, I would say just about everybody has been affected or been exposed to having the unfortunate situation of being laid off. But in this particular episode, I don't want to focus on all of the negativity surrounding that necessarily. Like, I've had my personal pity party, and I am more interested in talking to all of you about how the video game industry can do better, how they can be better moving forward, because I've worked in the gaming industry off and on now for about 20 years. It hasn't been 20 consecutive years, because I have bounced back and forth between different corporate gigs as well as the video game industry. But by and large, when it comes to tech and it comes to the video game industry, layoffs, unfortunately, in my case, are no stranger. In fact, full transparency on my end of things, over the course of my career, and my career has been about 22 years now, I have been laid off about 10 times. Yeah. And unfortunately, it has become this byproduct of the tech industry and of the video game industries. So it never gets any easier. You do get a little more tough the more that you go through them. In fact, I thought that this shirt was very appropriate, considering the fact it says, "What doesn't kill you gives you XP," because I feel like the 18 to 19,000 of us that are going through it just in the gaming industry alone, I don't even know what the numbers are on the tech side of things, but collectively, what doesn't kill us will give us experience. And I think that's kind of a very fitting situation for us to be in, especially considering how obsessed we all are with updating our resumes and trying to communicate what kind of experience we have. A part of the experience is actually being able to navigate the waters of being unemployed, because it is definitely if you haven't gone through it before, it's a mind job. It totally is. I mean, like, you have to go through getting rejection emails from companies that you're really excited to work for. You're having to try and figure out how you're going to schedule and organize yourself on a day-by-day basis, because now you don't have a 9-to-5 or whatever it is that you used to do. So there can be some head games that comes with that too, especially considering the longer that you stay unemployed, there are certain types of questions that start to enter one's head, like, am I competent? Am I incompetent? Am I just not cut out for this job or this industry that I love? Am I doing something wrong? And I would say 99% of the time, it's not the case at all. For instance, in this situation that we're in right now at the beginning of 2024, there are so many folks who have been laid off that the market is just absolutely saturated. There is this gluttony of very talented people that have found themselves in the situation of having to find a new job. And so I think it's important to point that out and just be like, if you've been unemployed for a few months or an entire year and you're just, you're starting to doubt yourself, you're starting to wonder what's going on, don't let those negative thoughts take hold. Don't let them take root inside of you, because like I said at the beginning of the show, it is a tough job market out there. Anytime that you have a position that opens up, the recruiters are being overwhelmed by all kinds of candidates that are completely qualified to do the job that they had posted. In fact, it's interesting too how over the last month and a half that I've been laid off, there have been two main types of posts on LinkedIn as I check on every day I check it for new jobs and that sort of thing. And one of them is of folks who have either just gotten laid off that day, because we've literally had it was almost like a day by day update of which studio is laying off people next. Or the second post would be of recruiters who oftentimes are begging the community to please stop overwhelming their inbox with so many resumes and that sort of thing, because they're just buried. And you can't blame them. You're just like, yeah, but I get it. I totally understand. So the main focus of what I want to talk about today, and I'm bringing up my notes as I talk to you, is having a better perspective of why the game industry layoffs have occurred, but also too, how we can move forward in terms of when the next huge rounds of layoffs go on, because they will. Layoffs unfortunately are a very present thing that we all have to deal with from time to time. But having said that, how do we equip ourselves and set ourselves up for more of a successful stage of unemployment in the future? And that sounds like an oxymoron, but hey, there's a gold nugget in there somewhere. So, okay. There are four main areas that I've been able to personally identify in terms of active components that have played a part, I believe, in what has transpired with regards to the layoffs over the past year of 2023, but especially going into 2024, because it's insane to see how virtually every large publisher or game studio has had layoffs. The first one is major acquisitions. When you think back to 2023, that was like the time of all kinds of headlines talking about how Microsoft had acquired Bethesda, or Microsoft had acquired Activision Blizzard, or Sony had acquired Insomniac, or Sony had acquired Bungie, right? You had these really large acquisitions that were taking place that just made everybody go, wow. Embracer Group is another example of how they were very hungry in acquiring all kinds of studios. And it was happening on, I would say that during the first 6 months, 4 to 6 months of 2023, we kept seeing these acquisitions take place. And it became kind of like this, well, who's going to be acquired tomorrow kind of thing. If you think about the money too, like we're talking billions of dollars. I think if I remember correctly, Microsoft had spent something like $79 billion acquiring Activision Blizzard, something along those lines. Tremendous amount of money. The thing is that I have been through multiple acquisitions. And so the first thing that I can tell you is anytime that a company gets acquired, there are very good odds that there will be sweeping layoffs that occur. Doesn't happen right away, but what is typically seen is whoever the owner or founder of the company is that got acquired, they're going to be really excited. Okay. They're going to be bouncing around the office like Richard Simmons because they're a part of the deal. So whatever kind of deal was struck, there's a very high probability that they will be receiving some kind of really nice payout. So they're skipping around the office. They're all happy. The folks in the trenches, the remaining 90 to 95% of the entire company won't see a penny from that. And there's this transition that happens where it's, essentially like the president or founder of the company that got acquired, their role is going to be to basically help transition their company into being fully absorbed into the other company that acquired it. Once that happens, then odds are they depart. They leave, and oh boy, do they get a nice golden parachute out of that deal too. So what happens next is you have a period of about, I would say, 3 to 6 months where there's this kind of unsettling calm that happens in the office where people are wondering, okay, who do we report to next? What kind of projects are we going to be working on? Are we still working on the projects that I was working on before the acquisition? And so there is this kind of almost like a lull, if you will, kind of a hiatus feeling. And this tends to happen quite a bit. Like essentially once everyone's guard has gone down and you're thinking, oh, well, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe everything will be fine. That's when the layoffs really come in and hit. And you realize that the 3 to 6 months where things were kind of quiet and you weren't really sure what was going on. And you're just, you're kind of sitting there, you're a little concerned about job security, but you still have a job. Well, it's because the higher ups behind closed doors were going through the lists of each and every employee and making a cut list. But it takes a while because they have to really, negotiate and talk and, deliberate on what it is that they feel still has some sort of perceived value for the new company that has acquired the old one. So that's a part of it. And when you think about what has happened in 2023, you have all kinds of layoffs that have occurred. Like, for instance, in Activision Blizzard, they were one of the places that have had layoffs and were greatly affected, which makes perfect sense because Microsoft acquired them. Bethesda has also had layoffs. Makes sense because Microsoft acquired them. And you see this pattern repeat itself over and over and over again. And this is not exclusive to the video game industry. This happens in tech as well. And it's something that I don't have a full understanding of because I'm not a business person. I'm a creative, and the visibility I have into it is limited to basically like I'm on the receiving end of whatever happens. And while there are certain folks like a skeleton crew that can remain and keep their jobs, there are large swaths of folks who will lose their jobs. For me, it's just, I find it kind of ironic because in my mind, I logically think about how if a company was attracted to another company and wanted to acquire it for the product that it has, I would think that they would want to hold on to the people who invented said product of interest. Now, I understand that it's not limited to that you also have say different types of technology that a company has created and they want to be able to own the IP of and be able to use it for their own products. Yeah, I get all that. But in terms of just strictly personnel, I'm thinking, wouldn't you want to hold on to those same folks that that made you want to spend those billions of dollars in the first place? It's just, I don't know. But again, my visibility is limited. So there's that. There's the major acquisitions aspect of this. Another thing that I've been looking into is the fact that the interest rates have risen over the last couple of years. And I think it's hovering at around like 7% or so. The thing about game, and I can't really speak too much about the tech side of the tech industry, but like in terms of the gaming industry, it's completely normal to have loans taken out in order to get through a gaming project, because game projects take, as we all know, multiple years to be able to finish a game and have it launch. When you have an interest rate that was pretty close to zero, that really is business friendly in terms of people being able to take out more aggressive loans because they don't have to worry about as much interest to pay back. And I think that as a result, there is more of a concern about the ROI or return of investment. Sorry, I had a little bit of a brain fart there. I'm like, return of something, I don't know. Anyway, I think that also plays a part in it, where perhaps there were certain types of loans that were taken out, or maybe new loans that had to be taken out because the other loans were exhausted. And as a result, they had to also cut folks because they just couldn't afford to continue paying them in that way. The third thing is AI. You know, during my job search over the last month and a half, there has been a creep of different types of positions that are opening up that different companies are hiring for, where they want people to be able to work within AI, to be able to make it more sophisticated, to be able to basically train it through machine learning on whatever type of platform the company is interested in. I do believe that there should be some legitimate concern about the role that AI plays in the workplace, because more and more we are seeing this rapid iteration of various types of AI, and it's not limited to just one or two or three types of AI. There are all kinds of AI that have been created as a result, because that's just the really sexy, hot, trendy thing right now. And that makes sense why NVIDIA's stock is just skyrocketing, because they are producing different types of cards that can handle AI types of computation. But I think one of the things that's worth mentioning is the fact that you have folks, not everybody, but you're starting to see more and more people have this infatuation with what AI can do for them, how they can automate different types of tasks that were normally handled by humans. And I think there's going to be more and more of this going on, where at first they're going to have people who get hired to work in this kind of like AI environment, this incubation environment, if you will. But then as soon as they're able to get whatever kind of AI they're working on to a certain level of autonomy of operation, those people are probably going to lose their jobs. They're going to be gone. And I think that is also something that's going to be very problematic, that honestly, we as a community need to be very aware of, which I know we already are. But it's important to be able to look at what else we can be cognizant of in terms of how we can limit this. Because I do believe that AI can be a very useful tool in certain capacities. At the same time, this type of technology is ripe for abuse. And when I mean abuse, I mean you have a lot of jobs that can potentially be taken over by this. So it doesn't matter if you're a coder, or you are an artist, concept artist, or you're a designer. It really doesn't matter. If you're in production, like they will have AI that can really expedite all these different tasks in the very, very near future. So I do think that while I don't think that particular reason is as prevalent, I do think that it will become more and more in the spotlight in terms of why it's going to be more difficult to find work in the future. I would say within the next 5 years. And the last example, or not example, but the last reason why I think we're going through game industry layoffs is just plain old-fashioned corporate greed. You know, I think that there were people in positions of leadership that made certain types of bets or had certain types of roadmaps that did not pan out. And I think that there was a lot of like pie in the sky type of thinking in terms of when interest rates were really low and like it just seemed like it was like a super friendly environment to be able to conduct aggressive hiring and that sort of thing. But there is a very present issue with all of this when it comes to corporate greed. And what I mean by that is, if you look at how all of this has gone down, I don't know of anyone who has been reprimanded or has lost their job or demoted in terms of the gross oversight of how all of a sudden these studios are having to lay off hundreds, sometimes thousands of employees. There's just no accountability for that whatsoever. And especially when it goes to the salaries that a lot of these folks make. You know, I know Bobby Kotick, who's no longer at Activision, you know, when that acquisition finished with Microsoft, even prior to the acquisition, Bobby was making at least $150 million per year as a base salary. That's not counting the bonuses he received. That's not counting the sweetheart golden parachute deal he got when he got to walk out after transitioning Activision Blizzard to Microsoft. It's hard. It's a hard thing to really come to terms with, because you think of the people in the trenches, right? You think of the coders, the engineers, the game designers, the audio folks, you know, the concept artists, the 3D modelers, the animators, the producers, people in operations. You have all these people that are in the trenches that are all part of making this game that sells or has the potential to sell millions, if not billions of dollars worth of sales. That makes these people like Bobby crazy super rich. But what happens to the folks in the trenches is they get stepped on. They get forgotten about. They are looked at as expendable. There's a very wrong perception of what kind of value those people bring or don't bring. And there is a very clear and present sense of being expendable, because the industry itself, the video game industry itself, is one that's very appealing. It's very attractive to folks who want to play and develop games. So, you know, it goes back and forth with a lot of that, but that kind of dovetails into a bit of how I think we can do better collectively as an industry. You know, if I think about, for instance, Bobby's base salary, which is public, you can look it up. I was doing some basic math, and let's say, for instance, that Bobby knew, and of course he did know, that, you know, once the acquisition was completed, that there was a very high likelihood that there would be layoffs. If I were to do some basic math and just, let's say, for instance, for the sake of the example, if there were folks at Activision who made $100,000 a year. And I know that's not accurate because everybody's making different types of salaries, but just for the sake of the example, right? And in fact, I'll bring up my handy dandy calculator just to make sure I'm not steering you wrong in terms of the numbers. But let me bring it up here in my laptop here really quickly. Okay. So I'm typing in 100. In fact, I'll even, I'll show this to you so you guys can see this on screen. Here we go. So that's not enough zero. Let's see. That's a lot of zeros. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So that's $150 million, right? Now, part of being a good leader is being able to try and plan ahead. But not only plan ahead, you act as a shield or a champion of the workers who work under you. And sometimes that means making a temporary sacrifice. So if we took $150 million and we divided it by 100,000, okay, That equals out to 1,500. So to give you an idea, let's say, for instance, the final year that Bobby was there, because remember, Bobby had worked for Activision for, I want to say, close to 20 years, maybe over 20 years. I'm not exactly sure. He was there for a while. 18 to 20 years is what I'm guessing. And if he had decided to just forego his base salary for the final year, we're not even talking about like him not receiving his bonus. Like, he would still receive his bonus. He'd still receive his little sweetheart, golden parachute deal. He could have financed 1,500 employees' salaries if they were all making $100,000 a year. Now, when you think about that, and you think about how many people got laid off at Activision Blizzard, which was 1,900 people, he could have kept the gross majority of those folks gainfully employed for at least another year if he had decided to be proactive in that and truly cared, if for nothing else, just as a good faith gesture of, hey, thanks a lot for making me so much money. I know this is going on. There may be some kind of weird stuff happening. I'm going to do this for all of you. I mean, what an amazing demonstration of good leadership that would have been. And it's not limited. I don't want to be like bagging on Bobby, but like this can happen with any given CEO that makes a tremendous amount of money. I mean, if you think about pretty much every CEO within the game industry that is a part of like a larger institution, they basically, their base salary is basically winning the Publishers Clearinghouse every single year. Think about that. So, yeah, there's food for thought as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, let me go down this list here. So, first on my list is, if you know your company is going to have layoffs, it would be a terrific idea to host a local job fair at your studio. This is terrific. If you as a studio, and the gaming industry is not that big. It really isn't compared to other types of industries. But I mean, other industries do this too. When I worked in the fintech sector, I participated in one of these types of events, and it was wonderful because essentially the company sends out a notification to other like-minded, or not really like-minded, but other similar types of companies saying, hey, we are going to be going through layoffs, but we have all of this terrific talent all consolidated in one place. We'd love for you guys to be able to maybe send some recruiters over to talk to us, or send some HR personnel, something like that. You can review resumes that day. You can have one-on-ones to sit down and talk. Terrific idea. And when you think about some of the locations, for instance, if you're in LA, or you're in Seattle, or you're in even like, say, Austin, those are hubs of multiple video game studios that exist right there. And it removes that whole process of having to upload your latest stuff on the LinkedIn, trying to get the recruiter's attention from there. I mean, it's much more orderly to be able to have like this local little job fair thing where, like, you have, say, 5 to 10 different types of game studio reps that are all there. And you could even have a list that, like, all the employees can sign into, like, for like a 20 to 30 minute little one-on-one interview, so they can go over the resume and talk about what they're interested in, show off some demo stuff. A terrific idea that helps to get those folks who are being affected into the mindset of like, okay, I need to look for my next job, but also feel like there's already some kind of momentum that's going on. And the fact that the studio that they are going to be departing soon is doing so in a way that values them. Like, it doesn't, they're not just forgetting about them or kicking them to the curb. They're actually saying, hey, this is something we want to do for you guys, because honestly, we'd like to work with you guys again in the future. And we recognize the fact that you are human beings, and that, it doesn't really, there's not a lot of skin off our teeth at all to be able to host something like this. Super, super cool. The second thing I have on my list is that, I do think it's important that whoever is in leadership, if it's a studio head or whoever that person is, that they need to be present for each and every layoff announcement that goes on. And it's not just an announcement, but like, if HR is going to be sitting down with someone and giving them the bad news, that person who made the decision in the first place needs to be present for that. And it's worth noting, I'm talking about people from the who are the very top that are being affected and the very bottom that are being affected, because these are real life decisions that will devastate families and impact them for a while until they can get back on their feet again. While the people who made those decisions, odds are they're not being affected in terms of financial situations and so forth. So I do think also, like, when you do that, there's a respect that is kind of a natural byproduct. Like, even though, like it's still awful that like you're getting laid off, right? You're getting the bad news or whatever. But it communicates that you are taking personal responsibility for your decision, and you want to be there for that person to be able to answer any questions, or just offer some words of advice or encouragement, or just be a soundboard and listen to those people. But too often that type of role or expectation or even action gets kicked down over to HR. So HR has to bear the brunt of a lot of that. And to be honest, I mean, HR is kind of an intermediary. They're not necessarily one who has all of the information handily available. And so when these types of things happen, people have questions. Especially if they're just finding out about it at that moment. Let's see, what's next on my list here? Oh, okay. So this is kind of a little bit of a continuation of what I just talked about. But another concept that I think would be very helpful is, when layoffs occur, layoffs are normally kind of, they can see it coming, basically. It's very rare that all of a sudden, just one day, there's just layoffs and like no one knew. The studio head didn't know, the president didn't know, the CEO didn't. I mean, it just boom, just kind of hit that same day. No, it didn't. Leadership they have a budget. They're always checking on how much they're spending, and they are probably aware that the layoffs are going to be happening 3 to 6 months in advance. Okay. But again, they're just trying to prepare all the paperwork and processing and whatever goes into that for when the day is, because they like to be in control of the message, right? They don't. This is kind of the old way of thinking is they want to be in control of when they break the news, because they want to try and keep employees as productive as possible. They don't want to, they want to minimize the amount of drama, basically. I think it would be a better idea to actually let the impacted employees know 6 months in advance, or as much runway as you can give them. If it's 3 months in advance or 6 months in advance, just once again, be able to sit down with them and let them know, hey, here's what's up. This is what's happening. Due to X, Y, and Z, there's a very high likelihood that we will have to have layoffs that's going to occur 3 months from now or 6 months from now. What's going to happen is, yes, people will still be upset, but once again, the people will appreciate the fact that leadership is doing what they can to give those folks a heads up so they can update their resumes, so they can update their LinkedIn profile, so they can start to like put together like some sort of updated demo reel, right? Essentially, you're not ambushing the people the day of, saying, oh, by the way, this is your last day, or this Friday is your last day. And, here's your severance. If you even get a severance, once again, the type of response you will receive is that while the folks will be upset that they are going to be losing their jobs, they are going to appreciate and respect the fact that their company saw fit to let them know with a lot of runway ahead of them, saying, hey, by the way, you're still working here. You're still making a paycheck. You got 3 months worth of pay and 6 months worth of pay on top of, if there is in fact a severance package on top of that. I think that's a wonderful idea. I think that if we had that in place, that it would definitely help to set people up for success in terms of preparing to get their next job. And really, I mean, it's at that point when the decision is made for layoffs, it's a done deal. I mean, it shouldn't matter all that much to whoever's in charge, whoever leadership is that's making that call. Let's say, for instance, someone updated their materials and they were able to find a job, like say 2 to 3 months after they were made aware that that they were going to be impacted. Let them go. Who cares? Let them depart on their own terms. But I think that is something that all studios could easily pivot to and have a much more favorable result. The next idea I have on my list is, if you have, say, for instance, like a studio is not in some sort of dire financial situation, but more there's a different reason for the layoff itself. Instead of just having layoffs, see if the impacted employees can pivot to another team within the organization, because odds are they have certain skill sets that perhaps aren't being utilized in their current role, but that they would be completely proficient or adept at being able to do a different role, and be able to talk to them, be able to talk to HR, see if that is something they would be interested in doing. Because I bet you odds are they would be willing to pivot and do like a different type of role while they were looking for something else. Or maybe that would just be, they'd be fine with it. Maybe they wouldn't look for another job. They would just be fine doing the new type of position itself. But at least they're given the option. Once again, they're given the option to be able to decide, do I want to go through with the layoffs, or they have this other position over here. It looks like, the pay is either the same or maybe it's like slightly less, but at least I'm gainfully employed. Again, you're giving the employee options. This is kind of like a part 2 of what I was talking about, but see if the publisher can place an affected employee at another one of the studios. So if you're one of the big publishers and you've got multiple studios that are under you, maybe like the studio that's having layoffs can't place their affected employees in other types of roles, but maybe there are other studios, once again, local job fair, that you can place these affected people at. Because odds are these major publishers have thousands of positions, most of which are full, but they're always looking to hire different types of roles and that sort of thing. Again, you don't want to lose talent if you can help it. If you just want to just be done with it and wipe your hands and be done, that is a way of approaching the situation. But I would think it would behoove folks to be able to see, okay, how do we hold on to these people? Maybe we can no longer keep them at this studio, but let's move these 5 people to this studio. Let's move 10 people to that studio. And oh, by the way, those studios that are actively hiring will be grateful because these people are already in network. So there's that. The next thing I have on my list is talking about the salaries. I kind of mentioned this already with regards to my example of Bobby Kotick making $150 million per year. If there was something going on where folks would be impacted by layoffs, that and I remember when I worked for Cisco Systems way back in the day, the CEO, which I believe was John Chambers, he was actually doing this where there was, I think it was just after the .com bubble burst. And so you had a lot of tech companies that were scrambling and trying to figure out how they could, keep the company in the black and all that kind of stuff. He ended up taking a $1 a year salary for the year that I was working there. And on top of that too, he made his private jet available to any employees who had a need for business travel to go places. That's good leadership. because it's easy to be able to continue making that tremendous amount of money as a CEO or another person in leadership that's really, you're not hurting, right? You have feathered your nest very well. But again, people, they recognize that. It registers with them. You get so much more respect when you see how the person who we all looked up to is doing what they can for the company and, more importantly, for their personnel. The next item on my list, and this also deals with leadership as well, is that if you as a person in leadership have decided to have layoffs, then there should be something in place where basically you don't get a bonus for that year. Because this is your call, and what has happened, what has transpired in terms of the pre-planning, the road mapping, the scope, all of that going on, that was something that leadership approved for. But it didn't work out for one way or for one reason or another. And see, what happens is that sometimes you'll have people in leadership who they will execute layoffs in order to get their budgets rebalanced. So that way they hit their numbers and they can still receive their end of the year bonus because they look like they come out of this whole thing smelling like roses because they're not over budget. That's disingenuous. And I'm putting that lightly. Because once again, we're supposed to all be in this together. And so it's something that I think is not too much to say. And yeah. Another item on my list is, and I've been through this actually a couple of times now. I have noticed that if the studio or the company moves into a posh new office, that layoffs are around the corner because they spent a certain amount of coin getting the new office. And it's not limited to just that reason alone, but in terms of, I've had this happen both on the corporate side of things in tech, as well as the gaming industry, where they are moving places. They've got all this new renovation and furniture and just really neat amenities that go along with that. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, and by the way, we have layoffs. And you're just like, wait a minute. And I'm not saying that was, like I said, I don't think that was the sole reason for that. I think there were many other components to why things happened the way they happened. But I think it definitely contributes to that decision because everything is based on money. Everything's based on budget. So Warren Buffett, who is one of the people I really admire, he has, if you don't know who Warren Buffett is, he's basically one of the most successful investment folk in America. He's a multi-billionaire. It's amazing like what he's been able to achieve in the stock market and that sort of thing. He's known for having companies that he owns that don't have like super pish posh or bougie types of office spaces. It's actually quite the contrary, where the office buildings that his companies work in are actually, maybe they're a little old. Maybe they don't have all of the crazy cool amenities that a lot of these places have. And the reason for that is that they are maximizing profit. They're not having to spend all that money on frivolous things in order to attract talent, because at the end of the day, they are wanting to make as much profit as they possibly can and keep their people gainfully employed as a result. Something to think about. And it's interesting because I get it. I mean, I am definitely one of those people that love me a new office, right? I love like the new digs and the new furniture and all the little whiz bang bells and whistles and stuff that they put in, and free food, and yeah, I get it. I get all of that. I love that stuff too, but I can't help but think that since I have been through 2 different layoffs shortly after moving into a new office, I don't know if I have new office PTSD. Like, I don't even know if that's a thing or not, but it does. I don't know. Moving forward, wherever I end up working, if we move into a new office, I'm probably going to be on pins and needles for a while until I know for sure that's like, okay, are we safe? Are we good? I don't know. So anyway, the next item that I have here is actually something that relates to Riot Games. So Riot Games has had their own amount of controversy surrounding them as a company, as a culture, and even in the past, even like when they conduct layoffs. But I'm not interested in talking about that. What I am interested in talking about is actually what they have provided for their employees in 2024. And I was very impressed. I was very happy to see this. On LinkedIn, they posted the fact that every impacted employee for 2024 was receiving 6 months of severance. So they're receiving 6 months of their base pay, plus they were receiving still like I guess it was like a prorated bonus, like whatever kind of annual bonus that Riot Games would pay out to its employees. They were making a portion of that available to the impacted employee, and they made 6 months available for benefits to remain active. And we're not talking about people who are in management or lead positions only. My understanding is that this was made available to everybody who was working for the company that was getting laid off. There were a couple of other details that were included. I think one of the things was if employees wanted to, they could purchase their equipment that they had been using for however long they've been at Riot for discounted prices, which again is a pretty smart move when you think about like the rapid eclipsing of computer hardware, right? Like if you buy a computer for an employee and that employee is with you for say 3 to 4 years, they're going to be due for a hardware upgrade anyway, because the guts of a PC or a Mac, they get improved so much over like say 2 or 3 years, and you want your employees working on the best equipment possible. So having some kind of program in place that allows affected or impacted employees to be able to purchase that, I like that. That's pretty swell, because on top of that too, it helps the impacted employee be able to continue working on like their portfolio or whatever kind of like future gigs that they're getting. They'll have hardware that's probably more recent than what they have as like their personal PC or whatever. Now I understand that it does get a little tricky in terms of like, okay, well, how do you get all the sensitive materials off the machine? And I mean, there would be a step-by-step process involved with that. I mean, you could send in your systems back into IT at any given company. They could wipe all the drives and everything else, and then have it shipped back to you. And then you would, I mean, basically what I'm saying is there are solutions. There are definitely solutions. I think the final thing that was on my list too is that as you work for different types of studios or publishers, it doesn't matter, is that when you're working, sometimes you are granted certain types of RSUs, which is a very standard practice. RSU is restricted stock unit. Okay. All kinds of companies will provide this type of perk. And usually what happens is that you can't actually have those fully become available to the holder until after, say, like a product gets released, or there's a certain amount of time that is dictated through a contract. The unfortunate aspect is that if you are granted, say, a certain amount of RSUs and then you get laid off before whatever that date is, you then forfeit, you lose it. They cancel the RSUs that were granted to you. And that is unfortunate as well, because that is an opportunity for folks who are working at any given position or company to be able to benefit from that down the road financially. And again, we're not talking about, millions of RSUs or even tens of thousands necessarily. It really depends on like what's going on. But I think it's definitely a slap in the face, and it's something that adds on top of the depressing nature of getting laid off, where it's like, you could be working for a place for X amount of years, and you see how like the company is rewarding your loyalty. They're rewarding your hard work and performance and what kind of results you have contributed to the overall success of the company. So they grant these things out, but it's bizarre how like there is this very, in some cases, very long grace. Well, I mean, it's not even a grace period, but like a waiting period for them to be able to become available to folks to be able to take and own. I just feel like that needs to be reviewed as well. Having said all of that, I don't necessarily know how realistic it is that many or really any of the items that I have listed would necessarily become standardized within the gaming industry. I do think that it would probably require state laws to get passed. And honestly, in certain places like California, for example, where they have passed laws that force employers to list what the salary bands are for any given position, that's a very good step forward. And I think the next step past that would be to pass laws that would at least have some version of this or some kind of representation when it comes to these different ideas that I have talked about. Because I do think at the end of the day, we want everybody to be able to have a successful career. We want them to be able to save for retirement. We want them to be able to provide for their families. And as it stands, this has just always been the case with the gaming industry, where it's very cutthroat. We get ambushed way too many times. And there's a real negative impact that occurs as a result of that. Some of which I don't think folks who are in the higher up positions necessarily have experienced for themselves. But I mean, that is a detriment to whoever it is. Like if you get laid off and you can't find a job right away and you go 6 months to a year without finding your next job, you're raiding your 401k, maybe you're raiding your Roth IRA, maybe you're racking up credit card debt. I mean, like that does not enable an individual to be able to properly save for their future. In fact, they're forced to abandon their goals for the future in order just to pay their bills. I think we're better than that. In fact, I know we are better than that. And I just think that it's high time that we take a look at how we can be able to reform this and understand that layoffs are a necessary evil. They will continue to happen, but how do we safeguard ourselves? How do we set up the folks who will be impacted in a way that allows them to leave with dignity, that allows them to leave knowing that the employer would hold on to them if they could, but they couldn't. That wraps up this episode of Joygasm. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you enjoyed this episode, I invite you to check out patreon.com/Joygasm, where you can enjoy exclusive perks and early access to the show. Not to mention, it continues to help financially continue doing this saucy program. Also, click on that subscribe button as well as that notification bell. That way you will not miss a single solitary episode of Joygasm. It drops once a week, each week. And while you're at it, you could do a search for Joygasm TV, spelled Joygasm TV, on your favorite social media platform of choice. We're on most of them, if you want to be able to become part of the Joygasm family. Last but not least, you can do a search for Joygasm TV on Twitch to see me stream my gaming adventures live most of the time every Wednesday night at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. I'll see you next time.